How's it going, everyone? VenomousStare here, your source for all things 2v2. Today I'm going to be talking about the map pool in depth because nobody ever talks about the 2v2 map pool. If there is a 2v2 scene, you don't really hear anything about the map pool, so I consider myself a contributor to the 2v2 scene at the very least. You really don't see a whole lot of other people involved. And I want to talk about the maps because a lot of newbies play 2v2 and a lot of people who don't have a solid 1v1 foundation. You see a lot of accounts with 1v1 gold, 2v2 diamond. Well, a lot of those players don't even understand how the maps work because they just don't have the fundamentals down, so we're going to talk about that. Now, the 2v2 map pool is very good compared to how it was in Wings of Liberty and even Heart of the Swarm. Blizzard has done a good job ensuring that there's macro maps and not just ridiculous, really short rush distance maps. If you're not familiar with how the 2v2 map pool was in the past, basically it's how the 1v1 map pool was in the games Wings of Liberty beta and when Wings of Liberty initially released, which is the maps are very close, they're very compact, they're very tight, the rush distance is very short, the bases are hard to defend. In short, they're very bad for Zerg. It's similar to the 1v1 maps in the 1v1 pool. If you remember, Delta Quadrant was like this. Steps of War was like this. And maps like that lend themselves to aggressive play where Zerg can never really take a natural expansion. Now, if you want to see a 2v2 map like this now, Magma Mines is kind of close, although the rush distance and the ramp make it manageable. This map, Shrines of Lizul, has a short rush distance. Now, whenever you judge rush distance, you should talk about where the ramp of your natural or your main, whichever is closest, meets their initial ramp. Now in 1v1 maps it's almost always natural to natural, but in 2v2 maps or maps with pocket expansions you should measure front ramp to front ramp. It's essentially your front ramp always. So in this case, like you see the front ramp is here, 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 and here, and there's kind of three back bases. So but the point is you judge front ramp to front ramp and you see the rush distance is very short. You don't judge like the gold to the gold, for instance, because you would never send an attack out from the gold to the gold. The idea is that your units are going to be exiting your ramp, and then you want to know how much time it takes to hit their ramp, which is kind of the point of contingency where you know that there will be action and units. So that being said, that's the concept of rush distance. Now rush distance is good for Terran. The shorter the better really for Terran. They always want to be at their opponent's throat. They're constantly producing units and attacking. Protoss to a lesser extent, and Zerg, to be honest, short rush distance is bad because the idea with Zerg is you want to endlessly make drones until your opponent makes an attack or doesn't attack, or you're forced to make units, and then you make units, and then your huge drone economy will always, in theory, allow you to produce more units than your opponent. And the reason that you don't mix units and drones is because with Zerg, all of your units come from the hatchery. It's not like with Terran and Protoss where you have your Nexus or your command center and then your other structures that build units simultaneously. The reason you want to do specifically only drones with Zerg is because if you don't make drones, you're sacrificing larva, and larva is this thing that is Zerg that kind of bottlenecks you. It's the thing that prevents you from making units, if you know what I mean. Whereas with Terran and Protoss, it's the time it takes to produce units through gates or barracks. So now that we have the basic concepts established of rush distance and why rush distance, like the shortness of it, favors Terran, we can actually have a discussion about the maps, because there's lots of lower level people who just do not get that concept at all because no one talks about it. I remember when I was learning the game I had no idea what to veto. Anyway, so let's talk about the first map, Sludge City. This is probably I would say the best map in the pool. Now, basically, the reason that I like Sludge City is it's a consistent macro map, and there's no really one abusive strategy that's too good on it. You're going to see a lot of these 2v2 maps, there's one thing that you always have to watch out for that's very common, that's oftentimes a nuisance, kind of inhibits what you can do creatively, even in 2v2, where the ability to create is so much higher because you have so much leeway because you can have an ally protect you or do something that complements you. So Sludge City is great because even though the bases are somewhat split, you share a natural, and the rush distance is somewhat long, and there's lots of bases that are easily securable. But the ramp is somewhat big and the bases are split, so you can cheese too. So it's really, in terms of strategic diversity, the best map if you want to see lots of different build choices and build possibilities. Sludge City is a great one. And you see games on my channel casted from Sludge City all the time, macro and cheese, so that's usually evidence of a good map. And by the way, notice I only have one map vetoed. Usually, in the past, I think in every other 2v2 season, I've used all my vetoes and wish I had a fourth. So great job, Blizzard. The map pool's actually really good. Fields of Death, not a huge fan of this one. Basically, this map is a super easy macro map. You have a narrow ramp, a shared base, and 2 free expos, and a long, long rush distance. Basically, how this map always works is both players fast expand, and if there's a Protoss, he might take both bases or get money dumped, and he'll almost always try to go mass air because the rush distance is so long. There's this big obstruction in the middle, and it's kind of a hard map to attack into if you control the natural choke, kind of this third base natural, in these side rocks, both of which are very easy to defend. You just get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bases for free. 6 bases. So usually what happens on this map is people go air, or they try to play turtle styles, sometimes mech, and it's really not that fun because it's very hard to attack into. But sometimes people will be stupid and try to take this gold base instead of one of the free ones, and they'll just die. If you were going to veto a map, I would say this would be a possibility, especially if you don't like mass air games. But if you like macro games, this would be a good one to keep open, because this is one of the easiest ones to defend on. Another thing that I want to note about the 2v2 map pool is a lot of people in 1v1, especially like for instance, a Zerg player will usually easily be able to say, well, you should definitely veto these maps, 1, 2, and 3. In 2v2, it's not as clear cut. How do you and your ally play? What are your strengths? What do you want to do? I mean, oftentimes the races are mixed. It'll be a Terran and a Protoss versus a Zerg and a Terran. So the cohesive meta is kind of thrown out the window. You don't really worry so much about, well, this map's bad for Zerg. Well, if there's 2 people, like, the odds are just so different than that of 1v1. So you really need to consider, what am I trying to do? What do I like to play in macro games or aggressive games? And kind of listen to what I describe the maps, or how I describe the maps. Because it's not as clear cut as 1v1 where, okay, yeah, the third's really hard to take, or there's a really good high ground spot to siege the third, or something of that sort. There's like a really good cannon rush spot, and the third, that hits the third and the natural like we saw in GSL. So this is a great macro map, Fields of Death. It's a decent map. You see lots of mass air on it. I do not like this map at all. Moebius Facility. I call it the Christmas tree map. Blizzard does this thing where they'll have a 4v4 map, and then it's like an 8-person map, but it's also a 2v2 map. And this is way better as a 4v4 map. because it's essentially in 2v2. It's this weird map where you have this massive base with way too much room, and the rush distance is really short and weird, and there's weird rocks that let you like siege your opponent. It's really bizarre. It's just one of those maps where there's too much going on. There's too many rocks. The rush distance is too short. The bases are too wide. There's too many free bases. It's just bad. I don't like it. It's a 4v4 map and doesn't play well for 2v2. Snowy Mesa is one of the new ones, and this one is unique. I haven't played a whole lot on it, but I think I like it. And one of the things that's worth noting about this map is it has 1, 2, 3, 4 easy bases and then a gold base with rocks. And it has this destructible rock tower that walls you in to your easy bases. And this rock tower only has 500 HP. Hey, calm down. This rock tower only has 500 HP, so you can easily kill it with your initial unit, a couple, like your first zealot or your first marine. You can have a couple workers work on it, a cannon, a spine crawler, so you can actually wall yourself in on this map. So if you're facing a Zerg, it's really advantageous to not ever have to worry about Zerglings in the early game. So I really like this map. They did a really intelligent thing with these double collapsible rock towers. One of the most annoying things I think in 2v2 is the natural bases being really vulnerable and open to Zerglings. Just too much so, too open. Like a lot of the bases being too open. So this was a nice way to Blizzard, like a wink for Blizzard to say, okay, we're not going to give you in-base expansions that are free, but we'll give you these rocks, and if you want to commit the early units, you can negate this one specific kind of rush. I really like that. As far as how the map plays out other than that, it's a lot of easy bases and a lot of easy defensive play. Essentially, after you have the aforementioned 5 bases, there's another easy mineral base, and then 2 kind of more out in the open gold bases that you can take. But there's so many free bases before that essentially you have like an easy 3rd or 4th with a gold, and both players kind of post up right here, and if there's a Terran in the game, your main always gets dropped. So it ends up happening on this map a lot as both people macro, and the main is just so insanely vulnerable to drops that both players end up turtling, and it becomes really defensive, and then whoever starts multitasking first and dropping the other person wins, and inevitably a big drop will happen, and the other person will just A-move over the very short middle of the map rush distance, because once it's gold base to gold base, they're basically right on top of each other. So that's how a lot of the games end in my experience, is someone dropping. Distant Plain, it's a very bizarre map, and it's another good one. Like I said, Snowy Mesa is another good map. I don't think you should veto Snowy Mesa or Distant Plain. Distant Plain, it's another 8-person map, but this one plays really well, and it's one of those maps where the spawn positions influence how the game plays heavily. So essentially on this map, you can spawn anywhere, close horizontally or vertically, and you get 2 pretty easy to take bases, but the rush distance is short, and there's some odd positioning things that go on if you spawn horizontal or vertical. Now, especially in games with Terrans, if you see right here at the natural, so there's 2 natural bases, at the second one, closer to the ramp, where you see my cursor, basically there's a huge weak spot where anything can kind of be sieged or parked and positioned down low to harry and harass your opponent and stop mining at their 3rd. Now this might not seem like a big deal, but the minerals are so low to that low ground, and the rush distance is so low, especially from gold to that spot it's on the same screen pretty much. It's so short that it's just so easy to harass. That's always one thing you have to note. Another thing that's worth noting, the air rush distance is absurdly short, so if you get vertical or horizontal positions, which is more than likely getting one of those, you're almost certainly going to face a huge drop or air tech. If you spawn close, I hate do this and never advise people to do this, but you should honestly blindly build a little static defense along where the close by air rush distance drop is, because it will almost certainly happen, whether it be a mid-game distraction tactic or oftentimes just a big play like a fast Oracle into Void Ray or a fast drop or fast Muta. You almost always see the fast air rush distance come into play, so a way to counter this is maybe a small amount of preemptive static defense. And definitely you want to get vision out here, an Overlord and Observer. You want to have something, maybe even a Viking patrolling. And then once this map opens up to macro, it's a really great map. What I really like about this map is if one team gets behind, it's very easy to play out and just kind of take. For instance, if you spawn top left and bottom left, if those are the two positions, and the top left team gets ahead, they can easily contain the bottom left team, because the bottom left team will really be trying to take both of the close golds, and they can easily take pretty much the upper right main and natural, and I really like that. Also, if you want to play aggressive or you're playing mech, you can favor to take the gold bases and kind of go for these static, safe, choking out type plays. So I really like this map, Distant Plane. It's versatile and it's enjoyable to play, and it's been in the map pool for a long time. Shrines of Lazul, I call this the cheese map. The reason I say that is you see the very wide open natural, and even though there's 3 natural bases, I already spoke about this a little. The rush distance is very short on this map. The natural is wide open, despite there being a little blocking pillar in the middle, which is a great move by Blizzard. I really like things like that help you wall in. But the natural is too wide open, and the rush distance too short for this to be a legitimate macro map. The rush distance is probably less than half than that of Sludge City. And if you notice, it's designed somewhat similarly to Sludge City. I think it's kind of what they had in mind, but no, this map is far too close. If you don't like cheese games, veto this one, because this is a great map for cheese. Magma Mines. This is an awful map for Zerg. If you play, this is my monkey face dog Elise, if you play Zerg or double Zerg on your team, consider vetoing this one. It's a very easy map to wall in, so Zergling aggression is bad. It's a very short rush distance, so Zerg is kind of at that disadvantage. It is extremely cramped. There is not very much flying room at all, so mutas are bad. The only flying room that is available favors Terran and Protoss flying units, because the dead zone is a gold base, and the dead zone is very predictable, so it's not very good for mutas. This map is awful for Zerg. Basically, it's so bad because the rush distance is so short that Protoss and Terran can just build up hefty mid-game armies and do mid-game pushes across the map, and they can be at the base of your ramp so fast that you really can't defend. Other than that, though, if you can simultaneously harass the top side and deny these bottom gold bases and the very bottom left and right base, that's the best way to play the map. If you're Terran and Protoss, the best way to play the map is to build up like Immortal / Colossus armies or tank armies, things that fight and force engagements on the ground really well. And as long as you don't die to air, if you just do these big sturdy pushes and siege your opponent, you can usually kill them pretty easily. It's a really bad map for Zerg. If you are forced to play this as Zerg, do not go Muta. I would even say try to go Lurker. I have a video out on my channel called 2v2 The Power of Lurkers, and I'll link to that will be in the description. Shows you how to play this map with lurkers. Go Roach, Hydra, just do not go Mute it. Mute is so bad on this map. So if this is like a really in-depth discussion on the map pool, how the 2v2 maps work and what you should look for. Not so much just here's what you should veto. It's not really as cut and dry as that in 2v2. So if you learned anything about maps, how the maps interact with the races, and what races are good with what maps in 2v2, subscribe for more. And there'll be more 2v2 on the way, probably some 3v3 and professional 1v1 games as well.